Okay, so we're back. Yeah, it's been a long afternoon trying to fit Pan's legs. As you can see, there's quite a significant gaps between the torso and the adjoining hips. The reason why that is because he's got to be affixed to the base, and the legs affixed to the base one way and then affixed to the torso another way. So there's a major issue there, and it's the same on his rear end. If I can, shall I turn this around? Hope he doesn't fall over. Don't fall, Pan. So that's his rear. And you can see that there's an issue. So his tail width notwithstanding, I'm going to have to fill in that area significantly with milliput, a lot of milliput. So yeah, it's a resin model, but you don't know that you've got fit issues until you start fitting parts together. But he's still a beautiful kit. I can't take that away from him. Just have to get cracking and use those old sculpting skills in terms of matching everything up once I applied the epoxy resin, so that you can't tell that there's an issue. But I will show you the legs and what I've spent the afternoon doing in a moment. Just bear with me. Be back in a tick. Okay, so here we are. These are the pins that I were referring to much earlier on. These are made of brass, and I've drilled holes into Pan's thighs, and they go quite a way in for support, and those have been super glued in, but I've packed around the sides with milliput, so that also lends support to the surrounding structure. So that then will be attached and inserted into these holes that I bored into the pelvis. So I'm going to use super glue to attach the brass tubing, and then the surround will be coated in epoxy resin. So the plan is that the super glue will go off in the socket, and that will support the resin while it goes off and while it cures. And the same will be done on the other side. Also, this afternoon I filled in that massive gap that was on his arm. I've managed to save quite a bit of the surviving detail that was there, so I didn't lose that. So I carefully packed the milliput in and then laid down the thin slithers of bark detail over that, and then roughly sculpted the bark details into the milliput to match up with the rest of the arm. Of course, that will need to be refined, finessed, and that'll be a job done. Also, yeah, there are some other parts of Pan's anatomy that I worked on this afternoon, and I worked on let's see if we can get this into focus. That's his face. Where's your chest? Can't really see it in this light. It's really bad lighting. I think we can just about see, you know, his teats, but those will be picked out once he's painted. So the spirals being etched into his or carved into his chest, and those teats are being grafted on using white milliput. So he's had quite a bit of cosmetic surgery done today. So tonight we're going to attach his legs, attach his arms, and tomorrow, which is Wednesday, we have to go out really early. We have to get that milliput put in. I might try doing it tonight. Get that milliput put in, and then either start painting tomorrow or Thursday, and Thursday is cutting it really fine, so we'll have to wait and see. But for now, I'm going to have to crack on. Be back in a while. Okay, we're back. It's Wednesday evening. It's been a good 20 hours or so since I've attached Pan's limbs, his arms, his legs, using a 2-part epoxy resin. Today's agenda is to fill in those gaps with an epoxy putty. I'll be using the epoxy putty not only as a filler but as a sculpting medium to further detail any detail that is not there present. So I'll be using a few reference shots for that. It's been a speedy project, surprisingly speedy. He's quite solid, as you can see. Let's pick him up. We can pick him up by one leg. Careful. So you can see there's some gaps there that need filling and detailing, but I'll do that with the epoxy putty, so it shouldn't be a major issue. So I'm hoping to do all that now this evening, so by tomorrow it will be cured and will need very little finessing in terms of finishing, and hopefully I'll be able to get some paint on him, some primer paint. Tomorrow is the last day really before I submit him, so I've really got to get cracking. So it's going to be a full on job. But anyway, that's what we're going to be doing. That's what we're going to be doing this evening. I'll be back. Okay, so we are back. It is, believe it or not, the 2nd of November, and as you can see, I've missed my Hobby Link International group build submission date, which is unfortunate. But having said that, I have encountered some, how can I say, complications, intricacies, and all that was tied up in Pan's satchel and fairy case. It was not easy to put together, and having test fitted it several times, I then decided to pin it with very small brass pins. All in all, it's taken 8 pins, so 4 on either side of the carrier case and the satchel, 1 in his shoulder, 1 in his hip, which you can't see because the case is resting there on his hip, and then on his back, let's turn him over, 2 pins there, so 1 vertical, and then there was 1 in the base, so you had like a slide and lock action to hold the straps in place. Everything is mounted under tension, and strangely enough, it took me a wee while to actually figure out that was the problem that I was dealing with, is that basically everything was mounted under tension, therefore everything had to be strapped into place. As you can see with Pan's thighs, let me try and focus this. It's being filled. Not only is it being filled in with milliput, I've detailed it. I've detailed it so that it would match the surrounding sculpture of the original artist. So basically I wanted to blend everything in so there was continuity. I didn't want anything to be jarring or out of place. I just wanted a nice, easy flow and continuation of the model surface, and that's what I've achieved here. It's marvellous detail, milliput. It's amazing how you can sculpt with it. It's both a dry and wet medium, so you can wet sculpt with it, which, how can I say, eases the pliability, the ease and flow of sculpting, so to speak. So it's really, really good in that aspect. Pan's face is being finished. The beard that was broken has been fixed with milliput. Come on, focus. And his beard, his goatee, has been extended also. And if you look here, where the strap goes underneath his hair, that hair is actually sculpted by myself, because if you remember, that strap just terminated in a big hole in his chest, and that was just ugly. So basically I had to sculpt some white milliput over that strap and basically continue his hair. I think that blends nicely. I didn't think that it would be good to actually paint and then sculpt. I thought just sculpt everything and then paint everything. I don't mind painting in and around the carrier case and the satchel, so that isn't a big issue. So, having missed the deadline, which is a great shame, we can see that Pan is basically finished in terms of his structural build. All I have to do now is attach him to the base with the fairy. The fairy's been been put together. The fairy had masculine features to begin with. Now the fairies in the film are actually feminine or kind of androgynous, but the features were too masculine, so I had to resculpt those features to soften them considerably. Also, I'm almost forgetting that, let's bend down here. If we look at Pan's foot or feet, I installed magnets because I thought if I attached him to the base with magnets, it would be easy to pack him away if I was going to take him to an exhibition or a competition, and I'll be able to take him out, put him on the stand again. But as strong as these magnets are, the sheer volume of resin that was used to cast Pan, he's just too heavy. Even for these magnets, he really is just too heavy. So while I don't necessarily consider the theory a failure, I don't really consider it a success either. It's just one of those things. But that having been said, these magnets will help secure him to the base as the epoxy resin is curing. So it's not a complete minus. So it's not a complete rain on play in terms of installing these magnets. They will have their purpose. Oops, I'm knocking the camera. Don't want to do that. So bring him back in focus, and this will be the last look at Pan before he gets his coat of primer and paint. So, this being the 2nd of November, this concludes part 1 of the Alfano Pan's Labyrinth build. Catch you in part 2. Bye for now. Okay, so we're back. Pan has been glued together using a 2-part epoxy resin. I've left him to cure for about 4 days, maybe a little longer. So that set now is rock hard. The figurine as he is now is rock hard, solid construction, pinned, glued together. So there's no issues. The primer has gone down, and I've used a Super Deck. It's a multi-purpose self-leveling, self-etching primer. Let's see if I can focus on Pan's face there. Yep, so there's been no issues. Laying down the primer, and this is part 2. So being part 2, we're going to start airbrushing, and we'll be back shortly to update you with our progress. Be back in a bit.
Okay, so we're back. As you can see, we've made a quantum leap step forward in terms of my progress with Pan. He has been primed, rendered, painted. Excuse the mess of my workstation. But yes, I've used a mixture of Tamiya, Umbral, Citadel washes on him. He's been predominantly hand painted over an airbrushed base. I used the airbrushed base as a loose guide in terms of highlights and shadow. I come to realise that Pan, being the sort of model he is, it's something that you can't wholly airbrush. It's something that you have to fall back on your old hand painting skills to achieve. And I feel as though I have done this. I've emphasised the wooden elements of his composition, if that makes sense. I mean, Pan or Alfano is a wood elemental. Those horns have really come out nicely. The eyes, if I can get a close-up of his face. Eyes have been glazed. I used a Tamiya glazing medium to achieve that. The eyes themselves are actually oil painted in a two-tone, so you've got a green blue transitional appearance. I've also used a glazing medium on and inside his mouth to create that wet salivary sort of look, if that makes sense. You know, being as we are, we don't have dry mouths, so to speak, if that makes sense. I'm probably not making an awful lot of sense this morning. The hair was painted using Humbrol Authentic Colour, which is a salamander orange, over which I used a very, very dilute Tamiya silver leaf, no, gold leaf actually, let's get it correct, because Pan, believe it or not, has some blonde gold highlights in his hair. If you look at the studio model or costume. As for the satchel and the fairy case, I painted in and around and in between. As I said, I wasn't going to how can I say, I wasn't going to paint them then put them on. The way that I build tends to be very holistic in that I build the model and then I paint the model, unless there's something I absolutely cannot reach and I have to paint first prior to construction. I apologise for making such a tremendous leap forward in terms of building and painting, but for expediency it was just a little bit difficult to film and paint at the same time. I've seen other builds, I've seen other professional builds, and they're much lighter, more pastel in tone and hue than my own, whereas I've referred to the actual studio prop and I've made him, how can I say, I painted him more in line with that. I just didn't want him to look like a toy, basically. Not that I'm saying other works look like a toy, I just didn't want mine to look like a toy. So yeah, that's how he looks from the front. we'll just quickly do a shot from the back. Just bear with me a moment. Oops. So here we are. We're looking at Pan from the rear. It's another shot of his horns. I really do like his horns, actually. I really do think they've come out better than I was hoping. You can see the highlights in his hair. I've also used Citadel washes to darken those elements as well, the layers. And if you look at the bark, his skin, there's a multitude of hues. I've used enamels, I've used acrylics, I've used my own particular blend of acrylic and enamel, which I've applied by using distilled English turpentine as a carrying medium. Most modelers would say, well, you can't blend acrylic and enamel. Well, you can with a bit of patience and a bit of application. Let's see if we can get more of these wooden details. This is his tail. You can see inside his hips there. I've used Citadel Thackeray Green for the lichen. I'm also going to apply some of the loose granular stuff, I don't know what you call it, to emphasize that mossiness of his bark skin, his wooden skin. I really need a proper filming camera to do this sort of filming, so I've got autofocus, so I'm not manually focusing all the time. There's his satchel and his fairy carrying case. The tones of which were mostly achieved using Citadel washes. I forgot to mention I used a bit of all clad as well. The gold hinges there, and the gold buckle on his strap, that's all clad as well. It's really, really lovely, the layers of bark, and those layers have lent themselves beautifully to painting. I have thoroughly enjoyed painting Pan. Absolutely. To the point where it's almost a meditation, so to speak. You just paint for hours and hours and the time just slips away. So all that's left really for me to do is the base, the labyrinth, the plinth or the monolith, and the fairy. So for the base, I think I will roughly airbrush it and then go over it by hand, blend everything in so it has that organic textural feel. Zoom in there, his feet, his foot. Of course I'll be putting photographic stills up so you can appreciate the finished model rather than looking at my unsteady camera work. But the detail is truly immense on this model kit, really immense. So I said, excuse my workspace, it's temporary. Yeah, beautiful kit. Oops, there's a brush that's just fallen on the floor. Yeah, don't regret buying this model one bit. Not one bit. Let's focus on the horn there. You, sir, one handsome looking dude. I really do feel as I've brought something very special into the world by building this kit. Right, so next time we see this, he should be almost complete, if not complete. As I said, I'll have stills in between. Right, we'll be back. We'll be back soon. Bye for now. Right, so we're back. As you will now see, I've taken another massive leap forward and completed the base. I didn't airbrush it as I thought I might. I just wanted to crack on, so again I fell back on the traditional techniques of hand painting. The labyrinth was built up and the plinth or the monolith was built up using glazes. I used enamel, used acrylic, and I used the Citadel washes. Oops, let's get back into focus here. also used Pledge Furniture Polish for the recesses in the Labyrinth to give it that damp, wet look. So we've got a lot of moisture building up there. That's what it's supposed to basically represent, a very wet, damp environment. And I think I've done that quite well, actually. See if we can zoom in here. Yeah. All the details being picked out with the washes. So you've got that nice contrast of surface and recess detail. There's one more little addition. And this is the fairy. Had to make it more feminine because the features were more masculine, as I described previously. So I've detailed it with putty, resculpted the head, resculpted the face, added breast to the chest area, and this is going to be airbrushed and hand painted. So we'll be back in a little while. So see if we can just focus in here. There we go.
Hello,
Back soon.
we're back again. Bit unexpected. I went ahead and as you can see, I've done a considerable amount of work on pan. When I say considerable, actually I've gone ahead and completed the model. The model comes with a female fairy that needed some work. As previously described, the fairy was more masculine as opposed to feminine, and I've altered the actual model to look more feminine in features. Looking at the fairy in comparison to Pan himself, the fairy seems a little bit too big, but I decided to leave things as they are in terms of, the whole package. So I've just included the fairy as is. I've painted the fairy green, as one of the fairies in the film was a greenish pink colour in hue or tone. The wings are iridescent. I used all clad transitional gold to scarabaeus green and blue on that. So as the fairy moves about in light, the wings pretty much change colour. They transist. But as you can see here, I've completed the background or the diorama setting that comes with Pan, and that's the plinthal monolith and part of the labyrinth. I was going to airbrush this, but in hindsight, not hindsight, that's the wrong word. Second thoughts, I decided to hand paint everything, and in doing so is keeping in character with the rest of the model stylistically. Excuse me. The stone, I wanted to have warm features, so I used an awful lot of creams and buffs, and then I weathered down with greys and greens. And I also used Citadel washes to accentuate the granite and the pits within the granite. See if I can focus in on here. I was going to use foliage, actual foliage, to cover the stone, but I feel that the foliage has been so well sculpted into the actual model with the Citadel green, there was no need for me to add anything to it really, other than paint it and add shadow. You have to forgive me, I'm a little bit tired, I've been a little bit unwell, so basically things are tumbling out backwards. Let's focus here on the labyrinth. I actually used the furniture polish to glaze the recessed parts of the labyrinth. In the film, those recessed parts are actually filled with water or some sort of dewy condensation, and I've done that with Pledge. That's the name of the product, Pledge. It's a really good medium actually. It's surprisingly good. So I just really used a lot of Pledge to get that damp, condensation, dewy, wet look, and I've done that on the base here. For Pan's Poultice mixtures, I've actually used real herbs, so I layered those pestle and mortars with a veneer of super glue, and then I added turmeric, and then that's nutmeg, and the one in the background is paprika, I think. I didn't want to paint those elements in because I didn't think that by painting them they would look authentic. So yeah, I used real elements, if that makes sense. I used real product in terms of
spices for his poultice mixtures. I think it's much more of a realistic look rather than just painting those elements in. I do apologise for my workstation. It's a terrible state. I'm squeezed into a very, very small corner, but I'm hoping to remedy things soon. But I'm really pleased with how the stonework has come out. Again, the paints and the citadel weathering washes again were applied thinly. By applying the pigments and the paints thinly, you get that lifelike look, like things are constantly in movement and flux. It doesn't look dead, it doesn't look static. And I was determined to bring some life into these stone elements. I mean, the whole model is a lively model. It's alive, and I wanted the stonework to be alive as Pan is himself. See my hand in the shadow there with direct lighting. I apologise. Not the best camera work, I'm afraid. As I said, at the moment we're just crammed into a corner. Right, let's show you what Pan looks like from behind. If you just bear with.